Thank you very much. 3 weeks ago, I was sitting next to a pool in the rainforest in Central Africa, a place called Nuabali and Doki in the north of the Republic of Congo. And I was able to have the unique experience of watching this completely relaxed bull forest elephant cruising around in this pond, hoovering up the algae from the bottom and really enjoying himself. I'd previously been there in 2014, and it was a completely different situation then. The elephants were much less relaxed because there was a real poaching wave going on. Things were not at all easy. This was a problem across large parts of Africa, and particularly in the rainforests, which are so difficult to protect. As you can see, Nuabali and Doki, where the arrow is, it's the northern end of the great Central African rainforest. It's one of the last really intact areas there, and it has really important populations of forest elephant and of western lowland gorillas. So I'm the director of the Elephant Crisis Fund. This was set up 10 years ago as a collaborative venture between Save the Elephants and the Wildlife Conservation Network. And the idea was to respond to the massive ivory crisis by producing money quickly and with the minimum hassle to people who are working at the front line to try and stop this ivory crisis. So we've been going for 10 years now. We've granted out more than $35 million to over 100 grantees in 44 different countries. So as you can see, we've got a pretty good coverage of Africa, and we also funded anti-trafficking work in Asia. I try and visit as many of the projects as possible together with my team so that we can see what's actually going on in the field, what the needs are, and how people have been able to use our funding to best advantage. Nuabali and Doki was really important and is one of our main destinations for funding because it was under such threat and it's such an important area for elephants. So for the last almost 10 years, we've been providing them with funding for a range of things like vehicles, radios, setting up new forward operating bases, helping to get the rangers deeper into the forest to deal with the poachers. And I'm very glad to say, thanks primarily to the dedication of the people on the ground, but also with our support, the situation has completely turned around. There hasn't been a single elephant poached, as far as we know, inside the park for the last 2 years. And in many other the sites we've been supporting throughout Africa, we're seeing the same thing. Where there are big elephant populations, they're no longer at threat of extinction or even their numbers being necessarily pushed down by poaching. And this is due to a combination of factors. We don't know how much each one has come to play, but we've been involved in supporting each of these. One is just better management at a site level, better communications, better transport, people able to get in and do their work. Secondly, most of the major ivory traffickers are now in prison, many in New York. And that has been a huge success. People are scared to traffic ivory. It still takes place, but it's nothing like the level it was 10 years ago. And the most critical thing is that the Chinese said they would ban the domestic sale of ivory, and they've done that. And they've done it very effectively, and they have engaged in law enforcement. There's much less ivory coming into China than there was, again, 5 to 10 years ago. So this is all good news for elephants. It's not such good news for small elephant populations. So if you've got a few thousand elephants, having 10 poached a year is not a big deal. If you've got 100 elephants, it does become a big deal. And this is a sort of new focus of our work, is these small, often critically important, isolated elephant populations where poaching is still a problem. And so this picture is from a camera trap in northern Angola. This is the southernmost forest elephant population in the world. Between 100 and 150 left. 4 have already been killed by poachers this year, and that is unsustainable. And we're really worried this population is going to go extinct. We're supporting an organization called the Kasama Foundation, who are doing brilliant work, but they need support from the Angolan government to set up a protected area to actually patrol and provide law enforcement. And so this is the sort of the next stage we're going through, is how to encourage the Angolan government to really look after these elephants and recognize their significance. Now, turning back to Nubali and Doki, with the core park under control, the new focus is what happens outside. It's part of a large landscape that consists of the park plus logging concessions. Now, you may think, gosh, logging concessions, that's a really bad thing. But actually, it's better than some of the alternatives. And well-managed logging concessions, like the ones around Nubali and Doki, are actually really important for wildlife. 2/3 of the elephants in this landscape are not in the park, but are in the concessions. Luckily, they are working with good partners and who make sure that, say, when they finish logging in an area, doing selective logging, they close that area down, make sure that poachers can't get in there. This photograph actually shows you that zigzag line is an old logging road that is now recovering. And some of these logging areas are really critical, both for elephants and for gorillas, and actually liked by them. So our next phase is to help the Wildlife Conservation Society, who manage Nubali and Doki and these surrounding areas, to help extend the range of protection out beyond the park into the logging concessions. Worse things than logging happen. Again, this is from my trip 3 weeks ago. A village nearby has had its boundaries extended. Slash and burn farmers have come in, chopped down all the trees. They'll farm for 3 years or 4 years, and then they'll move on to the next site. This is actually a lot more environmentally damaging than the selective logging. And even more dangerous than small-scale expansion of farms is roads. This is the existing road that goes to the west of Nubali and Doki. It's been the focus for the development of oil palm plantations that are very bad for wildlife. A new road is being built to the south of Nubali, extending to the Central African Republic. And it's really important that this is planned so it just doesn't become a ribbon development with farms all the way along and movement of wildlife blocked by this. And this shows the importance of planning. Human development will take place, but it has to be planned to minimize its impact on wildlife. So here and elsewhere in Africa, our new crisis is the crisis of coexistence, allowing humans and elephants to live together. So even with the poaching crisis now at a low ebb, elephants are still in trouble. Last month, I was in South Sudan. There are 3 herds of elephants left in that country. There used to be 70,000. This herd, the week after I was there and took this photograph, started coming into conflict with pastoralists over access to water. The pastoralists would dig wells, the elephants would come in and drink all the water at night, and then they would find there's no water for their cattle the next day. They killed, the week after I was there, they killed a large part of this herd. We're supporting African parks who work there to build new wells outside the main area where the humans are. And we hope that this will at least save them next year. It's really difficult. You can't get vehicles in, they're having to hire donkeys. This is something that happened a few weeks ago, and the response is needed now. The Elephant Crisis Fund has this flexibility that we can deliver funding straight away and deal with these kinds of problems. But as I was saying, there's a change in the way we do things. We now have to think about how can elephants and people live together in landscapes where the human presence is inevitably increasing. We know that there is a demographic, call it a time bomb, that there will be a big increase in human populations in all of these areas. We are going to lose more natural habitats. We're going to lose elephant habitat. But the important thing is that that loss is minimized. We also know there's light at the end of the tunnel. Population growth rates are going down. We can see towards the second half of the century that there will be stabilization, that this is not in vain. We're trying to help shepherd the wildlife through to what comes after the rise in human populations. So while we are still supporting trying to keep the ivory crisis under control, our new focus of effort is on trying to promote human-elephant coexistence. Luckily, within Save the Elephants, which is providing the technical support to the Elephant Crisis Fund, we have a team, including Lucy King, who works with both for Save the Elephants and for the Elephant Crisis Fund, who are experts in dealing with coexistence. So last year, with her team, she produced this human-elephant conflict coexistence toolbox, which gives ideas to people living all across Africa how to mitigate the impact of elephants on their livelihoods. That's one part, which is the mitigation. That's a short-term approach. It will be needed in long term, but for the long term, for things to work, we need to encourage people to do good land use planning. Now, the toolbox has been rolled out across Africa, and when we go and do our site visits, we bring copies of the toolbox with us. We talk through with the people on the ground what's likely to work for their local circumstances. This is an example of one of the pages. This is on beehive fences, which was the approach that Lucy discovered in Kenya and has now rolled out to many parts of Africa. It has been very successful. You can see in Tanzania, these elephants are not going through that fence, but there are other places where it doesn't work so well. If it's too dry, bees need water, it doesn't work there. If it's too wet, there tends to be disease. So in Central Africa, we're finding that electric fences seem to work better. However, they are expensive and they're difficult to maintain. So other approaches are likely to be necessary in different places. Now, it's not just a question of how you protect the farms and the people. It's also a question of doing this in an efficient way. And how people farm, how they develop new farming areas is really important. So this is a place called Upemba in the Southern Democratic Republic of Congo. It's one of the most dangerous parks in the world because of the Mai Mai rebels. It is also where the last savanna elephants of the Democratic Republic of Congo are living, between 100 and 200. And as you can see here, you've got manioc fields that are like 2 or 3 kilometers away from the villages. The elephants go and raid these crops. They probably don't even realize they're coming into people's farms. So we're helping Forgotten Parks Foundation, who are working here, to try and reduce the conflict and reduce the level of killing, retribution killing that is taking place, that is, again, in danger of driving this population to extinction. This sort of setup is much better, where you have a hard division, where there is a degree of planning. So you have areas that are for wildlife, areas that are for farming. Land use planning, it's very challenging because we're used to dealing with wildlife departments and not with the ministries, like ministries of planning and of agriculture, that deal with this sort of stuff. Also, you need to deal with local government. And some ECF grantees have started to address this issue. And the person who's probably made the most progress here or the organization is Ecoexist in Botswana. And so we're very fortunate to have Anna Songhurst and her team today, since her organization is really at the cutting edge of this work.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to be here. So I'm now going to take you to the beautiful Okavango Delta, which is in northern Botswana. And in Botswana, we've got the largest population of elephants in the world. Actually, it's now estimated to be around 127,000, so it's doing really well. But with such a big population of elephants, the biggest need for them is space. They need to be able to move between resource areas, be able to connect with other places. And so some of their biggest threats, really, to this population of elephants is where habitat is changed, where migration routes are blocked, and where the range is expanding into areas where people are living, then human-elephant conflict. So my name is Anna Songhurst. I'm a director and co-founder of Ecoexist, and we work to try and reduce human-elephant conflict and foster coexistence. And we're based up in the Okavango Delta, and in the area we work, there's about 20,000 elephants and about 40,000 people. And so in this area, elephants move from dry land areas up where the rain-filled pans are, and they come down to the Okavango Delta and the lush swamps that are there for the resources that they need. So they need water and grasses and fruit. Likewise, we have people who are now who have settled along the edge of the Okavango River and the top of the delta for the same reasons, to access the resources that the delta provides: water, fruits, grasses. And most people in this area are subsistence farmers. And so the elephants here, they use quite distinct movement routes to get from the dry lands down to the delta. And most elephants are using most of these routes most of the time, and we call those ones elephant corridors. And so they're kind of navigating their way through where there's fields and settlements. And in the past, what's happened here is that land use planning has been quite haphazard. So fields have been allocated in different places. Sometimes they've been allocated next to or on elephant corridors. And that actually has increased the risk of people to being raided by elephants, so elephants coming in and raiding their crops. Oops. And also what happens is where the elephant corridors are coming down and bisecting with the road, which is the main kind of route that the people can take to get between settlements, maybe to get to the clinic or for children to get to school, you end up with direct interactions between people and elephants. And that can actually lead to sometimes injury and sometimes fatalities for both people and elephants in the area. So what we've been doing with EcoExist is trying to address this root cause of conflict, trying to see how can we develop some long-term solutions and see how people and elephants can share space. So we've been mapping and monitoring elephant movement routes throughout the whole of the Okavango Delta. By doing ground surveys, looking at footprints, getting indigenous knowledge from the local community on where elephants are moving, and also putting the satellite collars on to monitor individual movements. And we've now mapped 68 elephant corridors around the whole of the Okavango Delta, so the east, west, and the southern parts. And we had the chance to now incorporate this information into what are called land use planning tools, which will then help the land authorities to be able to plan and allocate land so that there are minimal land use conflicts. So this involves kind of bringing in data on the movements of elephants. It involves bringing in data from the local community on preference for land use, and also considers the government needs and the policy implications for land use planning. And so what comes out of this type of a tool, it's an Esri-based GIS mapping tool. You get these kind of maps, which can then help the land authorities to see where there's the green areas, which are good agricultural soils for future arable development with minimal conflicts. So those will be areas outside of the elephant corridors. And it also allows them to show where elephant corridors are. And the land authorities have now agreed that they won't allocate fields or settlements inside these elephant corridors anymore. And then we take these maps and this information back to the communities to make sure that it's verified, make sure people understand that this is what the maps have come out with, make sure that they are in agreement that this is where the corridors are. We do the same thing with the government departments, making sure that land authorities or Department of Agriculture or Department of Wildlife, that everyone is on board. And we also work with the technical officers just to make sure that they can use this tool to help them with land use planning in the future. And then we've been demarcating all of the elephant corridors, making sure that people know where they are, and that helps to create awareness as well about what a corridor is and how you should behave when you're on one. And then human-elephant conflict, as Chris said, is a really complicated topic. It requires thinking about the long-term solutions, but also thinking about the short-term solutions and the immediate needs of people. So we do a lot of work on trying to see how to protect kind of cluster field areas outside of corridors with things like solar electric fences, and then also with individual farmers working with Save the Elephants and Lucy King, as you can see here, to look at different mitigation techniques like beehive fences or chili deterrents. And then we're also looking at this aspect of safety, so where children are needing to get to school and then they can't reach school because they're scared and they're coming across elephants. We developed this scheme called the Elephant Express buses, which now helps to transport children to school across the corridors safely. And now the next step is to think about how do you bring benefits back to people for keeping these elephant corridors open. So we're now working on ways to do that, and that's how we're going to be able to then maintain these corridors moving into the future.
So, Anna, thank you very much for this fascinating insight. And show how important planning is to help securing a future for elephants. So the Elephant Crisis Fund has been able to pivot to the new threats that are posed towards elephants. And although the ivory crisis has not completely gone away, it has reduced. We are now focusing our attention on trying to deal with these problems with these small elephant populations that are in trouble, trying to support the large areas of elephant habitat that are critical for long-term survival, and to promote human-elephant coexistence, both through dealing with the immediate problems through these mitigation measures and trying to encourage good planning so human impact is going to be minimized as far as possible. Thank you.
That's okay. Thanks.